Hi, Honor, and thank you very much for joining me here today for our podcast with C.L.E.A.R. And I'm particularly excited to talk to you because, in some ways, you really helped found C.L.E.A.R, or at least kind of set out the principles of C.L.E.A.R. But the other thing that I'm really excited to talk to you about is your book, which is, by the time this is released, is just about coming out, on avocados. And I believe it's an fabulous kind of an analogy for everything that we're going to talk about. But my first question is, what has led you to be sitting here talking to me today?
Well, I think it's such a fascinating journey to me. I didn't start my professional career in food systems or agriculture. I started doing sort of professional politics in the States. But I got completely hooked on the concept of food and agriculture and how we produce what we eat every day. And I just found the intricacies of it so compelling because it touches every aspect of our life. And people eat every single day, 3 times a day, or more. And yet often it's a really overlooked aspect of our policy. And so I just really enjoyed that challenge.
So what was the kind of first bit of transitioning your career? How did that kind of, because you've written so much and you've written on agroeconomics and all sorts of things, right? So was it just a personal interest and you just dove into the books and research and then started writing yourself? How did all that happen?
No, so I was my first sort of foray into agriculture. I was working as a lobbyist for Foundation Earth, which was an environmental NGO in Washington, D.C. And they got a specific project to look at how the World Bank funds agriculture in order to start redistributing large donations from sort of transnational corporations back down to subsistence farmers. And it just really captured my attention and interest, and sort of the rest is history. From then on, everything I wrote was about avocados and about agriculture and farming and how we produce the food that we eat.
So it was just being involved in the politics of it, and then it just sucked you in that direction of fascination.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree. It's not optional for us, is it? Food. It's something that we have to do, and it has the greatest impact on Earth that any of us have, way beyond transportation or any other aspects of our lives, which arguably are optional. But so. Were there any sort of particular, when you were sort of going through this, you must have come up against some moments where you thought, oh my God, we're doing things so terribly wrong and this needs to change. Can you sort of recount any particular sort of light bulb or moments of anger or bits where you thought, oh my God?
Well, I think one of the sort of turning points in my career was that, so I'm originally English, but I worked out in Washington, D.C. in the States for a long time. That's where I kind of started my journey in agriculture policy. But then in 2016, we had quite a tumultuous year in politics. So we had the referendum in the UK and we had Trump in the US. And I kind of thought, you know what, I've had enough of Washington, D.C. for a little bit now. I'm going to come back to the UK. So I started working, and it was this sort of period where actually, regardless of whether you remain or leave, there was this fascinating moment where the UK could redefine its agricultural policy. We could step away from CAP. We could come up with all of these, fascinating new approaches that were really future focused, that recognizes the tensions of climate change, recognize the tensions of globalized food systems, of population growth, and create something that was reflective of that reality and would take us into the next century of agriculture. And that was a really exciting proposition to me. But yeah, I got back to the UK and suddenly discovered that a lot of Westminster were looking to the US model of agriculture and saying, oh, well, isn't this great? We could have crop insurance and we could do GM and we could do all of these exciting things. And, shouldn't we be more like the US in our farming?
Oh
And it was
no, like worst
yeah,
case scenario. It's like
exactly.
you've run away from the big system to somewhere that has the hope of having something more ecological, and we're looking in the we're looking right when we should be looking left.
Exactly. And so, it was great because I had that experience and that knowledge and that expertise from a decade in the States working on these issues to say, hey guys, like this is not what we want to do. Let's not go down this rabbit hole of crop insurance, of GM. Let's try and come up with a more sustainable future for UK farming.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about America, because I often view that as in many ways having the two extremes of the worst type of agriculture and actually some of the best. Some of the greatest leading examples of regen are, places like White Oak Pastures and, all these lovely large scale stacked enterprise, really good ecological farming systems. And then, of course, you've got the absolute worst, which is the huge commodification of monoculture GMOs, every very reductionist in approach, input output kind of ideas, and it's almost like I see America as playing out the two extremes so that we don't have to, in some ways. I don't know if that's true, but also the terrible public health crisis that they have, which I believe is a result of poor agricultural practice, and I think that was something I was very fearful of after Brexit, is that we would not only start allowing the import of more American foods, but start following their systems. So what has happened? We haven't quite gone in that direction, but have we taken on some of that, or do you think we have come to our senses a bit more?
So I think anyone who has been sort of following agriculture policy in the UK has seen quite the sort of ebb and flow and sort of waves of optimism and pessimism wash over them in the last 5 years. But I think what we've got to is we've got the environmental land management scheme in name now, and seeing how that becomes implemented and seeing the intention behind it and whether it really lives up to its promise, I think will be the next 5 years. And whether it really does deliver, or whether we need to kind of go back and tinker with it again to see if we can get it to take us in that sort of positive, nature-friendly future direction.
And tell me a bit more about that and how it works, because I believe it replaced a system under the EU where people were just paid for owning land, basically, and the more land you had, the more you got paid, which seemed to just favour the rich and punish the people who owned less land for some bizarre reason. So please tell me more about this scheme and how it works.
So the environmental land management scheme, in principle, is going to pay for public goods. So the idea is that instead of just paying people who own land, they've phased that out, and instead they're going to pay farmers for environmental benefit. So ecosystem services. So if you plant more trees, or if you have more pollinator habitats, if you spray less pesticides, if you do reduce your fertilizer usage, you would get payments for that, as opposed to just owning the land, not even working the land, owning the land. And so that's the idea, is that will push us towards a more environmentally sustainable future for farming in this country. But as ever, devil is in the details. And, once you've got the big picture and the guiding principles, then you have to do the really hard work of putting in pieces underneath. Yeah.
So it is the carrot approach rather than the stick approach for trying to improve the landscape. It's incentivizing good behavior rather than punishing bad behavior.
So there will be an element of punishing bad behavior, but that probably sits in a slightly different place to the environmental land management scheme. It's more Natural England Environment Agency.
Okay.
Food Systems Agency. Yeah.
So tell me about the beginnings of C.L.E.A.R, because undoubtedly you know more about that than I do, because I've come in at a sort of slightly later date, and the reason I know about C.L.E.A.R is I co-founded a business called The Ethical Butcher, which was about bringing PFLA meats to market, and offering a marketplace for truly pasture-raised rather than the legal definition of pasture-raised meat. And that's where I met, obviously, Jimmy, Fidelity, etc. And but you were involved in Pasture for Life and in the beginnings of C.L.E.A.R, I believe. So please, yeah, tell me how all that came about.
Yeah, well, I've known Fidelity and Jimmy for a long time, and have done a lot of work with them in supporting PFLA and the sort of vision that they have. But with C.L.E.A.R, there was this sort of growing awareness that, you know, we've got this rising interest in on-farm data. And you look at what the Global Farm Metric is doing, you know, there's this idea that we can get a better understanding through science, through data collection, of what is happening in the ground on the field. But yet that doesn't necessarily automatically translate to the consumer. And at the moment, you're seeing much more interest on the consumers in purchasing more ethical food, or, you know, more sustainable food. People want to know the impact of their plate. They want to understand what they're doing and how their choices impact the planet. And so C.L.E.A.R kind of arose out of that understanding that there needed to be something that represented the method of production and the complexity of that to the consumer. So my role was to kind of coordinate a lot of the different interested parties and groups and organizations, and kind of come to a consensus as to what we wanted to advocate for, and then get that down on paper, and get everyone to sign on the dotted line, which was a bit like herding cats, but we got there in the end.
So it's almost like, would I be correct in saying it's taking the concept of Pasture for Life and applying that single issue to all food?
Essentially, but it's recognizing that when we produce food, we can get trapped into looking at one impact. So if you look at just carbon, let's say,
yep,
then intensive chicken can come out looking great because it has a small carbon footprint, but it's terrible for biodiversity and it's not great for public health. But if you look...
all the chickens,
all the welfare. Yeah, I mean, it's not great for anything other than really just meeting that one, you know, slightly more carbon friendly number. And similarly, you know, if you just look at, you know, the water usage of almonds, let's say, you know, that's very water intensive, but it doesn't take into consideration, you know, the biodiversity benefit, or, you know, the carbon that's locked in the tree, for example. And so the idea behind C.L.E.A.R was to look at the totality of the impacts that our food system has, and not try and reduce it down to one number or a grade or a, you know, gold star, but say that our food is much more complicated than that and should be. And we should try and take the consumer on that journey so that they can understand the sort of very fine balance of of equilibrium that comes through our food production, and that you can get that reduction in carbon, but it comes at a trade-off of biodiversity, for example, welfare. And so trying to present more of that whole picture of how a food was produced, to give that clarity.
That's probably the best description of C.L.E.A.R that I've heard from anyone yet.
Maybe that's why they got me to write the manifesto.
No, that was fantastic. That was very concise, but also kind of broad. And I think that sort of leads us into, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about one of the things that really annoys me is when people say things like such and such a food is bad for the environment. And they're not talking about processed food, they're talking about single ingredient foods. And you mentioned almonds, which, you know, get an awful lot of flack. And I actually wasn't aware that there were elements of almond farming that were beneficial, because I've got caught in that trap of seeing all this terrible stuff about California water usage, and, you know, so what, that's a really good example of the complexity of these situations. And the one that you've written a book about, of course, is the avocado. So tell me more about avocado. Tell me about the good and the bad on either end of the spectrum.
Sure. So my whole thing is that we shouldn't demonize the avocado. It's not the avocado's fault. It's the method of production. It's how we grow it that creates the problem and the tension. So you can grow avocados in a super sustainable way that's really good for the environment, really good for communities, and you can grow them in a way that is really damaging. And there is a whole spectrum, and it's about our choices as a society on how we choose to grow the avocado, not the avocado itself that is problematic. Kind of the three main issues when we're talking about avocado production that are kind of focused on is the water usage. So it's a super thirsty crop. It requires a lot of water, and that can come into tension with local communities where they see water being diverted away from communities and into plantations. Biodiversity loss, land use change, where those orchards are expanding either into native land or pushing subsistence farmers out further. And then the other one, which is people like focusing on because it's probably a bit more sexy than the others, is the involvement of drug cartels and the sort of link to criminality, particularly in Mexico.
And where has that come from? I mean, I have come across that. I was aware of it, but why are cartels involved in avocado? Is it simply because it's such a valuable crop?
I mean, kind of. It's, to be honest, it's pretty hard to find any aspect of the Mexican economy that the drug cartels are not involved in. So it's not a huge shocker that they're involved in avocado production. It's a pretty good way to launder money, and you just invest in them. But one of the interesting things to me in researching this is one of the most sort of lucrative. So the majority of Mexican avocados are grown in Michoacan, which is a region in Mexico, and that used to be well known for growing marijuana. But actually, a lot of the marijuana producers have switched over into avocados because it's a similar topography that would support them, and you don't run the risk of having it sprayed or having the cops turn up every other week, and so it's more lucrative actually to grow avocados.
I would have thought that Mexico's main market for marijuana was probably the United States, and the US is now semi-legalized marijuana, so they're probably growing their own, and there's probably less trade for the illegal stuff coming in.
That's not necessarily sort of as clear cut as that. Okay. It's much more of a regional focus. So because Michoacan has just got that history of being the primary avocado state, let's say, as demand for avocados has increased again in the US, it just switched over more and more and more. So that is what you grow in Michoacan now, and you can grow your marijuana in other areas.
And so avocados obviously need a specific climate to do well. Is it quite a narrow band of conditions that they need to thrive then?
Yeah, it's very thirsty. It's very susceptible to frost. So the most popular variety, which I'm sure most people would recognize from their supermarket shelves, is the Hass. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why the Hass has become so dominant is it's the most frost resistant of the varieties that we have. But that's still, an issue. And that kind of the rise of extreme weather events associated with climate change is causing problems for avocado production because, they can't cope with that sort of drought and then flood. They need the consistency. So you're seeing that also push the avocado production up to maintain the climate. So they're moving further and further into native lands. But as many people might probably know, if you look at the kind of the major avocado producers like Colombia, Peru, Mexico, Kenya, they're also all coffee producers.
Right, okay.
And what you're seeing is the areas of the coffee regions are actually no longer sustainable to coffee production because the climate has changed so much. And so people are switching into avocado production because their Arabica beans don't harvest as well anymore.
And is that to do with water or temperature or
temperature primarily is that the coffee it's getting too warm for the coffee.
Too warm for the coffee. So coffee
then therefore they're switching into the avocado.
So does coffee then increasingly get grown at higher and higher altitude as things are getting warmer? And then what used to be there, avocados are happy with it?
Exactly. Temporarily, until it changes again.
It all changes and everything goes up the hill eventually. But surely there are, I think I remember buying avocados from Spain. So can we produce avocados in Europe and other places successfully? Or if we want to eat them, do they have to come from South America and Kenya?
No, so in the UK, the biggest producers or the biggest importers of avocados are Colombia and Peru, but it's Israel and South Africa. Right. So you're seeing that dominance. But you are able to grow avocados very successfully in Spain and Portugal and also in Crete. In Greece has a large avocado production.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or increasing. I wouldn't say it's large yet, but it is increasing. But as with anything, there's still knock-on impacts. So the water usage in Spain is pretty substantial, and there's a lot of criticism that the avocados, similarly the tomatoes, the other crops that are being grown in Spain, are depriving the ecosystem of much-needed water. And so there's some challenges around whether growing avocados in Spain is a more sustainable option. But obviously, it has a slightly smaller carbon footprint.
To do with the transportation, of course.
Due to the transportation, yeah.
So if we're buying avocados from South America, presumably they're picked very, very unripe. What's the sort of, is it ambient temperature? Are they flown? Are they ship freighted? How would a avocado go from Peru to the British supermarket, and then how is its ripeness managed throughout that journey?
I mean, it's a pretty intensive process.
Okay.
So, they get picked when they are still quite unripe, so that they have that process of ripening. They're packed and chilled, and they are shipped in shipping containers across the ocean, in very well sealed containers to make sure that none of the salt air and none of the spray and the damp gets in, and are chilled throughout.
Oh, they're chilled. So it's a chilled supply chain all the way across.
All the way across,
which is quite obviously energy intensive.
Very energy intensive. Yeah. And then once they get here, then they are processed and shipped to the supermarkets for us all to.
And isn't there some? I might have got this wrong, but isn't there some gas that's used to help them ripen once they get here? Acetylene or something weird like that, right?
Exactly. So, it has been so finely tuned. The profit margins are so huge that, what you really don't want to do is ship a crate of avocados all the way from Peru only to open it up and discover that they've all rotted on.
They're all black inside.
Exactly. Yeah, and they are a very fragile fruit. Anyone who's had their avocado sitting on their kitchen table a little too long knows that it can go from being rock hard to soft and squishy in the space of an hour somehow. Yeah, exactly. So perfecting that and ensuring that every stage is managed really specifically in order to maximize the amount of successful transfer is big business. And again, that is also one of the reasons why the Hass is such a popular variety.
Right.
Because it has that really thick black skin around it. that gives it that added protection. So the Hass wasn't, I mean, it only came into being really in the 20s, but
it was a crossbreed, right? Made
exactly.
in California.
In California, yes, by a mailman who was just an amateur gardener who happened to come across the most resilient version of the avocado that now bears his name all over the world.
Oh, that was his name?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Amazing. Right. I knew it was a crossbreed and someone had found, a way of, because the thin skin ones, you hardly see them anymore. What are those? What are those kind?
So the thin-skinned ones tend to be sort of known as the West Indian variety. So they are produced a lot more in the Dominican Republic and around the Caribbean. They were much more popular for a long time, and they have a much more kind of. They actually have a lower fat content.
Fat content. Okay.
Yeah, so people consider them to be the skinny avocado. So in the 90s, they tried to market them in Miami as the slim-cardo to try and encourage people who didn't want such rich fats and oils in their diet.
The low-fat era.
Low-fat era, exactly, the slim-cardo. But there's actually, they don't hold up to shipping as well because their thin skin makes them a lot more vulnerable. And so in Europe, you see more of the Hass because it's easier to ship. And so that's a decision that is made for us as consumers. You can find green-skinned avocados, but they're tough to find. And I think one of my predictions is that the green-skinned avocado might become more popular as we go forward, which is something that the World Avocado Organization also thinks, I think.
But for what reason then?
Well, I think from a sustainability perspective, you're growing. So you've got these huge plantations that are just growing avocados, but worse than that, they are just growing Hass avocados.
So just the lack of diversity.
The vulnerability that you have in that system is massive. And so I think there is a recognition across the industry that actually it would be a good thing for everybody if we got a bit more diversity and a bit more resilience into that system. So, that's good from an environmental perspective, but also you don't run the risk of one pest kind of wiping out the entire Hass line. Therefore
and with global trade, that could happen
very quickly.
Yeah. As we've seen with pandemics. So it's pretty complicated, but is there anything at the moment, what can we... Well, first of all, the most fundamental question is: should we be buying and eating them in the UK? And if we should, and it's if the impact is worth the nutrition, what do we look for? How do we make the best decision we can about buying avocados in the UK?
So it is a very healthy food. Despite the blip in the 1980s and 90s, it is good fat, it's good oil, it's healthy for us. And it's something that should be part of our diets. But with everything, it's about moderation and it's about understanding where a food comes from and the impact that it has in order to make informed and sensible decisions about what you eat. I wouldn't advise somebody to be eating 5 avocados a day, but having, one on your toast on a Saturday is not going to be the end of the world. It's about understanding how it got produced and where it comes from and being mindful about that choice. So there are some, we are in a position in the UK where it's difficult to have a direct relationship with your avocado farmer. You're not going to go to your local farmer's market and be able to shake his hand and say, thanks very much. Exactly. How did you grow these? That's not going to happen. So we have to rely on the international trade and the international supply chains, which predominantly will come through a supermarket for most people. And that can make it really difficult to make a sustainable choice. But if you use your assurance schemes and you have trust and faith in the relationships that they have and the integrity of their chains and their process. So I would advise anyone to choose an organic. Organic fair trade avocado from your supermarket is going to help mitigate the impacts that it has, the negative impacts that it has.
So
It's not
those two labels in terms of eco are about as good as we've got, right? Which is
it's
organic.
not perfect. Yeah. It's not perfect, but it's probably as good as you're going to get in a supermarket setting. Everything can be better. You can always be better, and you can always make more sustainable choices. But consistently, organic fair trade is probably going to be your best bet for purchasing an avocado. But that's why, something like C.L.E.A.R would be a really fascinating endeavor. If you could do that internationally, where you could have a much clearer sense of where your food comes from by looking at a label and being able to say, okay, well, this avocado has higher water usage, but it has lower pesticides. Okay, that's what I want. Or this has a shorter carbon footprint, but it has more community benefit. That's what I want. And being able to make that choice from an informed.
And literally tailor it to your own values in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has different priorities. I have different priorities to you. The things that I care about for my food, things that really kind of
resonate
are going to be different, and they should be. And that's, we should be able to create a food system where everybody can find food that meets their sustainable, ethical position and also reflects the tension of price. I can say, buy a fair trade organic avocado. Well, that means it's going to cost twice as much as if you don't, and you don't have that certification. And it is a healthy food. I'd rather somebody has an uncertified avocado from a health perspective than purchased, a multi-pack of crisps. That's going to be better, but it's a trade-off.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So, if I remember a little while ago when I was looking into avocados, and I wrote a piece about veganuary, regenuary, about I use the avocado as an example of making a simple swap without considering the greater implications. And after that, I started feeling really guilty for buying avocados, and I bought a box of them from a company called Crowd Farming, and they came directly from a farmer in Spain. And then this crate of avocados arrived at my house, and I'm like, look, I really like guacamole, but how, and that's another issue is we've got so used to having a year-round supply of all of our favorite foods. Mm-hmm. And yet that's not really how nature works. But am I right in understanding that avocados in a tropical environment are produced year-round? But in Europe they're more seasonal. Is that correct?
So in Europe they are more seasonal. In Mexico, Central South America, they have been kind of pushed in order to be produced essentially all year round.
Right.
So in the US, the biggest day for eating avocado is Super Bowl Sunday, because everyone has their guacamole and chips while watching the NFL. And is anyone, well, I don't know if the UK listeners would know, but the Super Bowl Sunday is late January, early February each year. That is super early in the season. But what it's done is it's actually manipulated the entire avocado market to push production earlier and earlier and earlier so that they can meet that demand so early in the year. So it's actually had the effect of shifting production to really pressurize Mexican producers to get enough harvested to meet that NFL demand.
That is crazy. What an interesting fact. That absolutely extraordinary. But so if someone is loves avocados and wants to buy them and maybe like me wanted to kind of buy them direct from an organic producer in Europe to minimize the impact of shipping, etc. Have you got any tips for what to do and how to store them? Because they're notorious for having a very short window of time between being a cricket ball and black sludge, and getting that timing right. What is there any way of saving, preserving that you know of to just go into a bit of foodie stuff here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the perpetual battle for anyone, any avocado aficionado is finding that trick. I mean, there are so many sort of urban legends about how to do it. Lime is meant to be a good one. So putting a layer of lime over the top of
like lime juice.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've got the acidity. You can get a little plastic, storage, so it minimizes the oxygen. But it's basically just oxygenation of the fruit. And you can freeze them. You can blend them into a smoothie and then freeze them to minimize that oxygen coming into contact with it. But that idea of, when we think about sustainable avocado usage, the wastage is massive because people do throw them out pretty rapidly, either because they're too ripe when they open them, or they don't ripen. If you cut into an avocado too early, you can't put it back in the fruit bowl and wait another week.
You kind of done it.
So that's a big tension that people face and that people are thinking about in the avocado industry. And one of the options that we might see coming to market in the US is this idea of a sort of evergreen avocado. So they did this with apples, where they genetically edited the genome of an apple so that it wouldn't brown. So the Arctic apple never browns. So you can slice it up and put it in your kid's lunchbox, and they'll open it up 4 hours later and it'll still be crisp and beautiful, just like it was when you cut it. And there's a consideration as to whether this might be an option for the avocado. So you could genetically edit it so that it would not brown, and therefore you could reduce the wastage. So the argument is you'd reduce food waste. You wouldn't have that as a tension, minimizing the impact on the planet. But obviously, genetic editing, genetic modification come with a lot of other tensions and reservations. And so there's that kind of dilemma. What do you pick?
I can't even imagine how that works, because that's an enzymic reaction with an apple, isn't it? It's a non-Maillard browning reaction. I can't really even fathom what it must be. Quite a deep change of the.
Which is why a lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable approving it or selling it or eating it. But that is one of the future considerations for avocados, or for really any food, is do we want to start genetically editing it?
Yeah, that tension. Is there some way that avocados could be? Have you ever seen any way that they've been like minimally processed into something that would stay fresher for longer to reduce wastage, like the flesh taken out of the fruit and the seed removed and actually just so it's not turned into guacamole or something? But is there any products like that can significantly reduce wastage?
So I mean, in terms of like global trade in food, the more you can in-country process, the more value added there is. So if you ship raw ingredients,
it's lower.
You make less money. The more you can process it, the better for you, because you can charge more. Yeah. So in Ethiopia, what they're trying to do is, instead of shipping avocados, which, as we discussed, have all of these intricacies of trying to get them out fresh and the chilled storage and the intensity and pretty high tech approach to doing that, they are instead processing the avocados for oil. So they do all of that processing in country to produce very high quality avocado oil, which is obviously not going to oxidize quite so quickly. I mean, oil does oxidize, but not in that sort of rapidity. And it can be bottled and shipped.
So you've got a higher value product, and more of that money is going back to hopefully
into the community.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's super fascinating. We hadn't even got onto avocado oil, but tell me about that. How do you use it? What's it good for? What could it replace?
It's good I wouldn't cook with it, but it's great in salad dressing. If you want a little extra zhuzh on your avocado toast, it's quite nice to drizzle a bit of avocado oil to soften up that sourdough. But yeah, any kind of high quality olive oil that you would use, you could switch out for an avocado oil.
Right. And we've been going on for quite a long time now, so I probably ought to kind of try and get a bit rapid. Tell me what your hopes are, not just for avocados, but like where have you seen? So all the problems that you mentioned to do with avocados, I think, are sort of very indicative of the food system in general. We've got social, economic, environmental, land usage, increasing natural land being used for more agriculture. So where have you seen examples of things that are moving in the right direction? Is it all doom and gloom, or are there some cases where communities are being revived and that land is being better used and through and producing food and producing some economic benefits? Because I find I've spoken to a lot of people practicing regenerative agriculture, and I've asked them, what does regenerative mean to you? And I've had some very different responses. And a lot of British farmers will talk about the number of pollinators, but I've had responses from farmers in other countries who've talked about regeneration coming from economics. So the fact that they don't have to move with the seasons, and their kids can stay in one school, and their wives don't have to work, or these sort of responses to do with regeneration. And I think that's you've mentioned many times in this conversation that we've got a lot of myopic views on what we consider impact to be. But where do you see things creating this holistic greater good? Tell me some good news.
I mean, I think that's completely right. So I always make sure when I talk about sustainability, I think the economic sustainability is key too. And I mean that in terms of the viability of farming income. A farmer has got to be able to earn a good living farming and producing food in order for it to continue. Otherwise, they're just going to stop. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And similarly, it's got to be economically viable and sustainable for people to purchase it. The majority of the population cannot afford to purchase high welfare goods at the moment because of our sort of the perversity of our agricultural system means that it's cheaper to produce damaging food and to buy damaging food for your health, for the planet, than it is to make those more sustainable choices because they're expensive because you've internalized the cost. But I think in terms of sort of positivity, I'm really excited. Each year when they do ethical consumption studies and polls, you see more and more consumers care about where their food is coming from. They want to know. And it's no longer just like a nice little added on the side or something to feel smug about at a drinks party. People really care about where their food is coming from, how their food's produced, what the impacts are, what it does to the planet. And more people are becoming aware of that. I think that's a journey. And I think, I'm still always learning about food and the impact that food has. I don't have all the answers, but I'm so encouraged to see that the population as a whole cares more and more about food and where their food is coming from and want to make that more sustainable choice. I think I'm excited about how technology can actually be a force for good. I think we've got a lot of innovation and when we're talking about the farming space, particularly in that sort of sustainable, regenerative, agroecological space, there can be a lot of rather negative perceptions of technology and a rather sort of Luddite response, knee-jerk response to things. But actually, I think that, the technology can help us make agroecology more efficient, make it more competitive with conventional farming. You can see mechanical weeders are really coming on, which just make life easier and more straightforward and save time and make it much more feasible to make that switch, the average farmer. And similarly, I think blockchain has a lot of exciting prospects. I know it kind of gets wrapped up in the sort of crypto, Bitcoin.
No, I agree. It's that idea of an uneditable ledger would mean potentially we could have a passport for a food item, and allow that traceability all the way through. That can't be, because I've heard some stories, particularly around things like soy, and this is just, you know, dinner table conversation, but from people in the food industry who told me that there are certain kind of conglomerates in Rotterdam where the soy arrives from Brazil, or the soy meal, and it's simply portioned up. They go, well, 20% of that we'll call that Rainforest Alliance, 20% of it we'll call organic, and you know, because there's no way of proving either way, and without this sort of idea of this digital passport, which blockchain can facilitate, it's pretty, there's a lot of food fraud.
Exactly. And I think, you know, as I said earlier, like, it's easier to maintain that relationship and integrity and trust if you're going to your farmer's market and meeting your farmer for your potatoes or your leeks or your celeriac, whatever you're purchasing this week. It's really difficult to do that if you're talking about globalized foods, avocados, bananas, coffee, tea, sugar. You know, having that confidence, you're basing it purely on trust in the assurance scheme. You can't have the rigor behind it as a consumer to go and investigate it. And I think having blockchain be able to create a connection between the end consumer and the producer, and having that integrity all the way through, will be really transformative.
That's incredible. I'd love the idea of picking up an avocado from a supermarket shelf and scanning a QR code and seeing a biog of the farmer in Mexico or something. And there's no reason why it couldn't happen.
Exactly. It's very achievable. We could do that. And I think, I also, you know, just personally, I think it can be so easy as a consumer in our, you know, busy day to forget about the farmer and to overlook them. And I think having any touch point where you can kind of connect with that individual and understand the labor that went into growing your avocado or your banana or whatever it is, I just think that's a wonderful thing to build that narrative and that relationship.
Yeah, and it gives the product, it sort of decommodifies it and it gives you a bit more reverence for it. And I would hope that would lead to less wastage in the long term, because it's almost, you know, I don't know, I started making my own bread and now I very rarely waste bread because I've made it, and there's that direct connection where half a loaf from the supermarket goes moldy and you just bin it without thinking about it. And I think it's anything, you know, a few fruits that you pick from the garden, they feel more precious because you have that connection.
Exactly.
As a wrap up, we've gone on quite a bit. Tell me about your book, when it's out and where people can find it.
Yep. So my book is The Avocado Debate. So it's part of the Changing Planet series that looks at the environmental impact of our planet today. And it's being produced by Routledge. And you can buy it through Routledge's website or through Amazon, depending on your personal preference.
Thank you very much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Anna.
All right. Bye.